What is it?
Don't you play any of that heavy metal music tonight, Mr. Sovryn. I don't know what happened to you, but you used to be such a good conservative boy.
Whatever you say, missus, you should mind your own goddamn business.
What did you call me, young man?
Oh, nothing. Good night. Tell me what to listen to. Try this.
Come on!
Bringing his hard-hitting attitude and journalism to hard rock and heavy metal. Get ready to get rocked hard and fast by the podcast champion, the man of tomorrow, Dragonaut One Brian Sovryn, on the Hard and Fast podcast. And now, here's Brian.
Woo! This is it, baby. I have been waiting for this for so long. I have wanted to do a show just like this. I have been looking for the venue, the platform to make this a reality, because let me tell you something, baby. If there's anything, well, all right, there's a few things I love in this life. Let's make no mistake about it. Of course, you are being joined. I'll finish off that list. Don't worry. But you are being joined by the podcast champion. Woo! Tap that belt, baby. The man of tomorrow, Dragonaut One. What the hell does that mean? Well, I'll get into that. But if there's anything I love in this world, as much as, say, well, maybe not as much, but around as much, kind of leads to it in some ways. As much as I love a good time, as much as I love sex, oh, you better believe it. It's heavy metal, baby, and it is so great to finally have a show where I can just let this ride, baby. And you are in for a treat because I have so many interviews lined up. I've got show reviews, and what kind of show? I'm talking about the rock show, baby. I'm talking about going to concerts, the whole thing, the hottest tickets with the, well, we'll save all that hotness for when I get to it. But I am so excited to do this. I can't stress that enough. This is a show I've wanted to do for a long time. And really, ever since starting Zomia One, this just gives me the opportunity to get into all of these things and all these aspects of, frankly, myself. But really, I've tried to inject my love of metal and hard rock and music in general, frankly. I'm one of those people, let's be clear here. If you've never heard the Golden Stallion before, because I know there's going to be some new listeners to this action, okay? If you don't know the Golden Stallion, or that's another one of my many, many monikers, I don't just like my music. I love music. I love art in general. I love the creative process. Okay, and that's a big problem because, you hear all kinds of people who are always saying, oh yeah, I love music. Oh, I'm such a big fan of music and all this. No, they like their music. They don't love music in the abstract. You are dealing with somebody who loves music in its entirety, but without a doubt, my favorite genre of the official genres, or whatever those official even means, but of the official genres that are out there, heavy metal and hard rock, that is where my heart is at. No doubt about it. Okay. So anyway, I used to put this, I would do album reviews on my show, Sovereign Tech, which is kind of my premier show that I do, and the flagship show, absolutely, of Zomia One. Just go to zomia1.com to find all of that. Or if you go to hardandfastpodcast.com, that's going to take you right to Zomia One. But, I would do album reviews, and 99% of the time it would be, some kind of rock album of some sort. Maybe it'd be a soundtrack here and there. I'm a big fan of instrumentals, classical, a lot of that other stuff too. Of course, metal likes to put its fingers in those pies. You just think Yngwie Malmsteen and so on. But regardless, anyway, I would put this in everything. Or there's the Zomia One. If you want to become a member of the Zomia One Underground and get access to thousands of hours of exclusive content and new content that comes out every week, including a Q&A that applies to all of the shows on Zomia One, you can just go to zomia1.com and you can join the Zomia One Underground there. But even on that, on the weekly Q&A that I do, at the end of the week, I always do an album review. Okay, and I've been doing that for some time now because a lot of people, well, that's part of the reason I'm doing this show, is that there's a lot of metal acts out there. There's a lot of hard rock acts out there, even though generally I don't differentiate with those terms. An electric guitar is an electric guitar, baby. That's how I rock. And, there's so much out there that people don't know is out there, or that there's classic artists that people don't know are still making music and so on. I wanted to do a show where these, this great music that's either still out there or these fresh artists that are bringing on perhaps some more classic sound or something like that, where they're getting the limelight. where they're getting attention, where they're getting notoriety, where they're getting the attention they deserve. And so that's why the Hard and Fast podcast is a reality, and why that's a major part of why it's here now. Because, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't want to be alone. I want other people to enjoy this music. And fortunately, I've met some of you, or heard from some of you over the years on the various shows on Zomia One, that have said, holy shit, thank you for introducing me to this band. Holy shit, thank you for telling me about this album. It really helped me out at the gym, or it helped me out through this situation in my life. And, that's the thing too. I mean, how many times, I can say this. I mean, I've been through, so much shit, frankly, in my past. Okay. Where, when you just put on that right album, and fuck, it gets you through that. In fact, this is going to kill my credibility right out of the gate, but what the fuck? I don't care. Okay. Because this is a topic and someone I actually want to get on the show in the very near future. But Scott Stapp, I know you weren't expecting that name. We're talking about heavy metal, talking about the Hard and Fast podcast. What's hard and fast about Scott Stapp? If you haven't listened to him, you don't understand. In fact, you got to hear his new single that he just released a couple weeks ago, Purpose for the Pain. And he has an album, I think it's coming out in July from Napalm Records. I am so fucking on fire for this album to come out. And the new song, if I think of it, I'll put a link in the show notes. I mean, it is just dynamite. You are in for a great rockin' time. And in fact, on the YouTube comments for it, most people are saying, like, fuck Scott Stapp, but this song's awesome, or they're saying, like, I don't agree with them about fuck Scott Stapp. I think Scott Stapp's phenomenal. I dig the Creed days. Look, I've been around, okay? I'm 37 years old, almost 38, and, I was there for all of this. Anyway, all of them would say the same thing. Well, like, wow, that's Scott Stapp. I can't believe it. This song's amazing. It's really, really solid stuff. Well, he had an album that came out called The Great Divide. And it was his first solo album after dropping with Creed after Weathered, which I think was a badass album. And in fact, most people don't remember Weathered, even though it was a big seller. They don't remember Weathered from Creed. And you might hear me in some Hard and Fast, because I'm going to re-release some classic content that was originally either for the Zomia One Underground, for the patrons, or it was originally a Sovereign Tech special, but where it was all about metal. Like I said, I've been injecting this stuff into my shows and projects for years. Okay, but I'm going to put it all under the Hard and Fast moniker here. So you might hear me talk about Weathered on some of these like re-release episodes. And of course, again, there's going to be all new episodes where we do reviews, interviews, news, everything going on in hard rock and heavy metal. But anyway, on that, you'll hear me talk about Weathered and like just how that was such a badass, hard-hitting album that nobody wants to give it any credit for. Of course, Mark Tremonti of Creed would go on and he would do, some of the hardest rock you're going to hear. Really, really intense shit. So anyway, check out Weathered. If you think you've heard Creed and you're used to like all the shit from whatever, Higher and all that crap, believe me, if you didn't listen to the rest of Weathered that didn't hit the radio, you're in for a real treat on that. Who's Got My Back Now, Bullets. There's just some really awesome rockers on there. But anyway, in 2005, Scott Stapp came out with his first solo album. He had another one that I wasn't as impressed with that came out later. But The Great Divide was this really like dark. There's points of it that feel almost a little bluesy. There's parts of it that sound a lot like Creed. I'm not complaining about that, but I'll tell you that album, like there's two songs in particular, Hard Way and Justify. Okay. I think they're the third and fourth track on that album. That, man, like I really related, and that got me through some crazy shit, like listening to that kind of stuff. Or I can think of some other songs from other artists at the time that I would, like when I was going through my divorce and everything, like it was, we're talking like a decade ago, not almost a decade ago, but going through all this shit, music can do that for you. So that's why it's important. That's why it's great to talk about it. And again, to highlight it, because new great shit is still coming out there, and it's not the shit that's on the radio, or maybe it's not so much on the radio, and it's not the shit, there's no more MTV, so fuck that shit anyway. So all of this is to say why I am doing a heavy metal hard rock podcast. And why don't we go ahead? This is our inaugural episode. This is our first episode. There will be a bunch of episodes coming out in pretty quick succession. Some of those will be some of that re-release material. But again, I will put with each of that, I will put in all new material at the beginning, just to make sure you have something. If you listen to this stuff before, you've got something new to listen to that's updated, frankly, for 2019. So anyway, but what I do want to get into for this first episode, I am not going to actually review. You're going to get kind of a double thing out of this, okay? But I'm not going to be reviewing a concert. Been hitting a lot of concerts lately. Been seeing some amazing fucking shows that I can't wait to talk to you about. Kiss, Dream Theater, Queensryche with Fate's Warning opening up. I mean, there's so much great stuff, and you're going to be getting reviews for all of that I'm really excited for, to share and tell you, because I mean, they're still on tour and you can catch them. And I recommend that you do, but I'll give you the reasons why. And then maybe we'll get some of these artists on the show. We'll get some interviews in, talk about their new albums that have come out. Dream Theater just had a new album out. Distance Over Time, fucking incredible. You're going to want to, hear about all of this. And so the Hard and Fast podcast is going to hit you hard and fast every day, or well, not every day, whenever it ends up coming out. This is going to be at least once a month, but we might end up there might be so much content, this might end up being a weekly show. We're going to see how that shapes up. This is not an experiment, but we are experimenting with what works with the Hard and Fast podcast. So anyway, what we have for this episode is pretty appertinent for a lot of reasons. It's apropos, actually, for a lot of reasons to open up talking about heavy metal. Because in a very real way, the main subject of this episode is what got me into metal in the first place, what got me into hard rock and heavy metal. And we're going to talk about Mötley Crüe. Now, we're not going to do, at some point, I would love to do like an album ranking. Some of the re-release episodes that you're going to hear on the Hard and Fast podcast are actually of album rankings, where I do like Kiss and so on. But this is one where we're going to talk about on March 22nd, just a couple weeks ago, as of this getting released on Netflix, at the Cult of Netflix, we had The Dirt, the movie, finally come out, which is the biopic, docudrama, whatever term we want to call it, for Mötley Crüe's, their book that originally came out in 2001. We're going to do a review of that movie, but then also we're going to do an album review of the soundtrack. And we'll do track by track. It's not just going to be like on the Wednesday Q&As for the Zombie One Underground, where I just give you a little overview of the album and, hey, go check it out, or whether or not it's worth it. Is it as good as I expected, etc. This is going to be, we'll break it down track by track, even though the soundtrack for The Dirt is in some ways a greatest hits album. In fact, in a very traditional sense, we'll explain what that means. It's a greatest hits album. Actually, I'll tell you right now what a traditional greatest hits album is. A traditional greatest hits has anywhere between 2 to 4 new songs, and then it's the hits, from over the years of a certain artist or band or whatever. Okay, and so certainly the soundtrack for The Dirt lives up to that. But there's some interesting things to talk about within the fact that it is effectively another greatest hits album, which for Mötley Crüe, I guess would chalk up to being like the third or fourth, depending upon how you want to count them. Because there were updated versions of greatest hits that they've released. Of course, there was Red, White, and Crüe. And like I said, it depends. Or then you have, of course, the classic Decade of Decadence from 91. Again, it depends on how you want to count their greatest hits albums, but 3 or 4 anyway. So this is, again, let's start breaking into the movie itself. The Dirt runs under 2 hours. Not a lengthy film, and certainly the book, which it's based upon from 2001, that had, let's say there's some differences. Okay, there are some very big differences. That book was written, all 4 of them were involved. Of course, Mick Mars. When we're talking Mötley Crüe, we're talking Mick Mars, Nikki Sixx, Vince Neil, and Tommy Lee. Which Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx have both had extraneous books outside of this. That at some points, I never really felt that anything contradicted what The Dirt said, but like Tommy Lee came out with Tommyland. He might have even had another book, if I remember correctly. But of course, Nikki Sixx had the Heroin Diaries, which he based the first album off that he did with his new band, 6 a.m., which is, I think they're coming out with new music this year, and also, ironically, a greatest hits album with that. Because again, like I said, that's how you're supposed to do a greatest hits album. It's not just supposed to be all hits. You're supposed to get some new music in with that action. Anyway, so the book was done with all 4 of them. John Corabi was also involved, which John Corabi is the singer that took over, the frontman duties for Vince Neil after the various arguments that occurred at that time, and when they came out with their Mötley Crüe '94 album, or really it's just the self-titled album, Mötley Crüe, but most Crüe heads, right? Mötley Crüe fans, they call it the '94 album. In fact, I'm actually getting ahead of myself because I wanted to tell you a little bit of a story about how I got into Mötley Crüe. Maybe I'll get into that because not that '94 was the year, but a little bit previous to that. Anyway, so this is, again, based on that book. The book had also more from Doc McGee, which Doc McGee is a major part of this film, which I was glad to see. Doc McGee, of course, one of the legendary rock managers, has done Bon Jovi, has done Kiss. In fact, he was, just when I was seeing Kiss recently, he was there with them, the whole thing. Just a legend as far as that goes. But he wrote in for the book as well, and it was really all kind of put together, and I don't want to say ghost-written, but more or less ghost-written by Neil Strauss. Neil Strauss, of course, very famous for his contributions to Rolling Stone, Rolling Stone magazine, but also he's written such shit shows, and I mean that in every sense of the word, like just horrible, horrible, horrible books like The Game, which is, a big thing on the what do they kindly call it, the seduction scene, or The Truth, which is an even worse book about relationships and all of this. So I'm not a fan of Neil Strauss whatsoever, but the book, The Dirt, when I read it in 2001, I really liked. I mean, I downright loved it. I thought it felt really legit. There's some stuff in the book that come into question. And again, as we'll find out a little bit, and of course I haven't read it in years, but there are differences from what the book says happened and as far as what was in the movie. As far as, biopics and docudramas taking creative license, look, that happens. There's times where I think it does a disservice to the reality, and there's times where maybe it does a service to the reality. Okay, one can think of the Queen, the recent Queen movie, where I think there's some points to it that do a disservice to the reality, where it could have been a lot more interesting if they stuck closer to the reality. But we're not here to talk about the Queen movie. So, certainly The Dirt coming out, obviously a lot of what propelled that was the success of the Queen docudrama, that has come out, Bohemian Rhapsody and all that. So, because this movie had been in mind since like 2006, I think Paramount was holding on to the rights for it. So just a few years after the original book itself came out in 2001. Now, before we start talking about the movie, I'm going to give you a little history about me and Mötley Crüe. Because why did I read the book? Why was I remember where I was in 2001 when this book came out. It was Barnes & Noble. I was waiting for the store to open. I wanted my fucking copy. I wanted it bad. Okay. Because at the time, I probably would have chalked up Mötley Crüe as my favorite band. I mean, Kiss, I consider Kiss my favorite band of all time, but like Mötley Crüe, is very neck and neck. Now, the reason for this is the first audio. So I was born in 1981, just to give you some perspective. Ironically, coincidentally, that's when Mötley Crüe, started shop, shall we say. Starwood, that classic show, all of that. So in 1989, I'm like 8 years old. And Dr. Feelgood comes out. Of course, this album is massive. Like, in fact, the movie, The Dirt, does a good job of explaining just how insane the album and the tour of Dr. Feelgood really was, because it was. So I buy the audio cassette. Like, I'm sneaking around at a mall. In fact, it's Riverside Mall. That was the name of it in New York. I was sneaking around and I picked it up. My parents didn't know, used my own allowance, the whole thing. And I'm like, oh no, this looks awesome. This is great. And I had heard just people driving by or walking by, whatever, playing Dr. Feelgood and I think Kickstart My Heart. I probably heard people listening to those. And, those songs, I mean, one could argue those songs are kind of overplayed now, but at the time they were fucking magic. There's a reason that album, did so much platinum, right? And so I pick up Dr. Feelgood and I'm listening to it on my little Walkman. Okay, I had this little red Sony Walkman. It was actually a Sony Walkman. My shitty little headphones, right, over-the-ear headphones that are really tiny. You can't imagine that we used to listen to music out of these things, but we did. But, I pop in the cassette, and man, I was rocking. I'd never, 8-year-old me had never heard anything like it. Not exactly accurate, because the first real, rock/metal song that I can remember ever, hearing, and like really singing, and in fact, I still know the words to this day, and I've known them my whole life since I was like 6, was Crazy Nights by Kiss. So, which is, I guess, kind of fitting. But anyway, in a very real way, Dr. Feelgood was like my first, rock album. Okay. And I'm playing it. And, here's the thing is that we really didn't have these in-ear headphones like you do today. In fact, even the kind of the earbuds that were available at the time were not things that like literally went in your ear. That was, only the purview, I suppose, of the Secret Service or something that would be allowed to have that sort of tech. But today, now that's what everybody uses. Personally, I don't care for them, but that's just me. Anyway, so point being is you could hear the music, if you played it loud enough, anybody walking by, you could hear what you were listening to in your headphones. And, some time goes by. Again, I'm still hiding this tape from my parents. And my dad finds it. And he is not happy. So I come from a very religious family. I'm an atheist, but I mean, now. But I come from a very religious family. He is not pleased at all and takes the tape away. Fortunately, now, I mean, I know audio cassettes are making a resurgence. Look, folks, there's a reason, and that's fine. I'm just a big supporter of physical media, so, go ahead and rock and roll with that. But there's a reason audio cassettes went the way of the dodo for a while, and that is really because okay, how to explain this? So they're very fragile, okay? They're tougher than records. They're tougher than a lot of other mediums of music, all right, than other physical mediums. Probably nothing is as tough as, say, Sony's mini disc back in the day. But really, it was a very tough, you could kind of toss the tape around and you could feel pretty confident about it that it would keep playing. Thing is, if you were listening to something that you really fucking liked, the tape would get eaten because the heads on your Walkman or your tape deck or whatever would get dirty. Okay. And you'd either have to clean it with, a Q-tip or even a needle or something, whatever, just like you were cleaning mouse balls at the time. And I don't mean mice running around. You know what I'm talking about if you lived back then. So anyway, but by and large, like tapes were very fragile. Like an easy way to destroy tape would be to just rip the tape out, cut it up, and everything. I mean, I suppose if you want to get saucy, you could splice it back together, which I've done that I had done that as a kid for some tapes. But fortunately he didn't rip it to shreds. Anyway, but I was just totally bit by Mötley Crüe. I thought it was awesome. But that kind of led me away. You're getting a little bit of history here, okay, for the Man of Tomorrow. That kind of, for a while, okay, after that, I started listening to other music because I was just afraid if I was into that kind of music like Mötley Crüe, that it would just get, taken away from me by my parents. That's not right of them to do. I mean, not at all, obviously, okay. So I got into some other music, got into like some more modern rock or whatever, stuff that was like available on the radio, as I would grow older, going into high school in the 90s and all of this. So, but what ended up happening is my parents actually got divorced, and eventually we found like a bunch of stuff that my dad had like stuffed away in a drawer. One of those things was the original tape that I bought in '89 of Mötley Crüe's Dr. Feelgood. And I was like, oh man. And I just remembered the whole thing. I remembered everything that I did to get my hands on that tape, and I was sneaking it around, and I thought it was so badass. I thought 8-year-old me was so badass. I was going to do myself the honor, almost that much time double. Like, we're talking now, I'm about like 16, 17, something like that. I do myself the honor of listening to that tape again to honor my 8-year-old self. Right. And I put it in. Terror in Tinseltown starts up, right? That kind of that opening riff for, that opening little bit for Dr. Feelgood, and everything starts going, and Dr. Feelgood kicks in, and fuck, like it all comes back, and I'm listening to it. I'm like, man, nothing sounds like this. This is so rock solid. And that, then everything else, starts playing. Kickstart My Heart, Same Old Situation. She Goes Down, one of my favorite Mötley Crüe songs, is off of that. All the songs start playing, Rattlesnake Shake, everything. And I was just in love again. I was totally in love again. And I remember going to a buddy of mine, and I was like, Dave, here, man, put this in. We're driving to a casino because he and I both look kind of older for our age, and so we could sneak into these places anyway. See, I do a lot of sneaking around. Anyway, I'm not one for rules. That's the bottom line. Not one for rules. Fuck that shit. And so I mean, look, I've been going to strip clubs, okay, since I was like 15, you know, and they didn't know because like I was balding early and I've been shaving my head since I was 17. So it all just kind of worked out for me. And Mötley Crüe certainly was the soundtrack for a lot of this action. But anyway, you know, we're going to the casino, whatever. And it's about a 40-minute drive for us from where we were in New York. And I was like, Dave, put this in. You're going to fucking love it. And he puts it in and he just goes, oh, I remember that song, you know, and man, it was on, you know, and we just, me and my group of friends, we all kind of picked our classic rock act that was like our big thing. Like another friend of mine was really into Def Leppard. Dave particularly was really into Van Halen. And mine at the time was Mötley Crüe. Like that was who I was really concentrating on. You know, just a few years later, or a couple of years later, really, like Kiss would just completely take over my heart. But, you know, Mötley Crüe was there and we were just, you know, we were rocking and rolling with it. So anyway, you know, of course, now I would end up buying, you know, and actually it was pretty fortuitous because around this time is when another moment that is shown in the movie, The Dirt, is where Nikki Sixx gets control of his, you know, of the Mötley Crüe music catalog because Elektra was more or less holding on to that. And they started Mötley Records, right? Where they re-released with a bunch of, like, they did a remastering, which I think they more or less, I could be wrong about this. And if one of them wants, you know, if one of the members of Mötley Crüe wants to come on the show, you're always welcome. I love you. You know, and you can correct me on this, but I think with the remastering at the time, digital mastering was a very new art. Okay. It was certainly not a science at that point. And I think a lot of the remastering was just, okay, let's turn everything up to, you know, 13, right? As far as volume goes. And so you got a lot of that, but they did a complete re-release of their catalog. I just ate it all up. I bought all of it, you know, even Supersonic and Demonic Relics. You know, I'd buy up all their albums. It was a very, very fortunate time for me to be a Mötley Crüe fan because there was so many re-releases going on. And then, you know, culminate in 1999. Granted, this is a time where Tommy Lee wasn't in the band. They had Randy Castillo, of course, who did, you know, the skin bashing, the drumming for Ozzy Osbourne for a good while. He was in their 99 release of, you know, New Tattoo, which I still think is a fucking awesome album. I mean, it's a fucking awesome album. And in fact, I'll say this here. One of my disappointments with the movie is that the Lewd, Crude, and Tattoo tour, which I thought was an awesome tour, especially since, so Randy Castillo ends up getting cancer. He performs on the album, but I think it was cancer. Sadly, he ends up dying, you know, but he can't tour with them for the tour to promote New Tattoo. And so they get Sam Maloney from Hole. I mean, this woman drummer, she is fucking dynamite. And it's great because every night, and you can even, there's a DVD of this that's out there, an official release of the Lewd, Crude, and Tattoo tour. But there, you know, you hear Vince Neil cracks this joke about how they're going to the strip club and how, you know, they go there and they take Sam with them, you know, they take her with them. And she, you know, he's like, you know, after 2 drinks, she's up on the tables dancing too. And, you know, it's a good time. And it's just pure, you know, lust and hedonism as you want, from Mötley Crüe. And I thought that was so cool. I saw that tour. I actually caught it in New York and it was a tremendous show. It had Megadeth opening up for him, which is really badass. I was 3rd row for the whole thing and fuck, that was, I mean, Nikki Sixx spit on me the whole thing. So, and I had a Dr. Feelgood shirt on, because, you know, it just meant that much to me, even though I wouldn't necessarily say it's their best album. I mean, I get tradition or, you know, conventionally it's considered their best album. I don't know that I would claim it to be the best or my favorite, by any stretch, but regardless, you know, it has a very, as I've explained, it has a very, you know, important place in my heart. And so I was wearing a Dr. Feelgood shirt and he spit on it and everything through the water bottle. And like, I never washed the shirt again. I just hung it up in my wall at the time, you know, teenage me. And all that is to say that basically at the time, the Man of Tomorrow, Brian Sovryn, was one of the biggest Mötley Crüe fans in the world. You know, come 1999, I'm graduating high school and everything, you know, I mean, and I am just full on Mötley Crüe. I'm all about it. And they're showing up in all my favorite places. They're even showing up, you know, in WWE and wrestling and everything. And it's really cool. So anything that Mötley Crüe has released, I'm buying up. Anything that they have new coming out, I'm jumping on, like their live album, which I think came out in 2001. I'm buying like multiple copies for all of my friends. You know, I'm buying it for me and I'm going there for on release day. Same with like when New Tattoo came out. I was in front of FYE. I was the only fucking person there literally the only person sitting in the mall waiting for this FYE to open up. And there's a conversation to have around that, because like these lines for music, maybe some listeners can email me. And right now you can email me at my Sovereign Tech email address, bbs@sovereigntech.com. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. But email me, tell me, have you ever actually like been in a line where it was like legit people and it's like around the corner where people are just waiting to get a new album? I've never really seen one of these things. And I lived in New York. Like, it should have happened. If it was going to happen anywhere, it should be happening there. But anyway, in 99, nobody was there for the new Mötley Crüe album. I was there though, waiting. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to meet other Mötley Crüe fans, whatever. They weren't there. It doesn't matter. Anyway, it doesn't change anything about me, but I get over this idea that people like are waiting for new albums to come out. And, but when like the double live album came out, Entertainment or Death, I end up, I'm buying copies for people, you got to listen to these guys. They're the fucking best ever, And when the book, The Dirt, comes out in 2001, I am all over it. And I think I read that book inside of like maybe 3 days. I was working as well. But outside of working, all I was doing was reading that book. I loved it. And the critics, largely at the time that I can recall, enjoyed the book as well. It made sense why it was going to get made into a movie. Honestly, if you're going to make a movie about any band, I think Mötley Crüe is the one to do it, because they are the fucking craziest, And this gets parlayed, of course, in the book, but also in the movie. It opens right up with just how fucking insane their lives were, and they really were. You can even remember in the classic comedy album, which not Mötley Crüe comedy. They never did a comedy album. That'd be interesting. But in the classic comedy album from Dennis Leary, No Cure for Cancer, he cracks a joke about Mötley Crüe, about how there's just some people who, no matter how many drugs you give them, they just won't die. And Mötley Crüe is one of them, of course, minus what happened to Nikki Sixx that you see in the movie, which inspired him to write the song Kickstart My Heart, of course, where he's declared legally dead for, so many minutes or whatever. But anyway, like Mötley Crüe lived a crazy fucking life, and it would make for a very interesting movie. Okay. And it's certainly made for an interesting read of a book. Despite, at the time, Neil Strauss, I didn't really have any idea who this guy was. Now I think he's a freaking ass, but whatever. Anyway, so you get into the movie now, which has finally come out. Again, it was getting optioned in like 2006. We're now in 2019. Takes about 15 years or so. That's what it takes, but rock and roll. I kind of wish that this came out a couple years ago. Last time I saw Mötley Crüe was actually on their farewell tour. And some people are actually, speaking of this, and we'll touch more on this when we do a review of the soundtrack for the movie The Dirt. Some people are complaining, hey, wait a minute, we thought you had a farewell tour. We thought you were done. But you released like 4 new songs on the soundtrack. Like, you got back together. You're not really done, are you? Are you going to tour again and all this? Well, Mötley Crüe did make it very clear at the time, okay, that, what was this? Was this 2015? Because it broke into so many years. Anyway, they did make very clear at the time that they were done touring. Like, that was going to be their last tour. But I'm pretty sure Vince Neil came out and said at the time that, well, that doesn't mean we wouldn't make new music. Like, we might still make new music, but we are done as far as touring goes. Of course, Vince Neil's not done touring. And in fact, if you want to go see Mötley Crüe play, just go catch Vince Neil, and he puts on a hell of a show. So having the new music mixed in, as part of this movie, that's fine. But the point I'm bringing up is I actually wish that this movie came out around the time of the farewell tour. I think that would have been a nice double whammy of Mötley Crüe and given people the chance to like really see. Because I saw them on the farewell tour, it was fucking great, and let them see them be great, So that's a bit of a shame, but that really has nothing to do with the actual, like, shall we say, quality of the film itself. So The Dirt is directed by Jeff Tremaine, who's known for, his work with Jackass, of all things, which, that's fine with me. I know I've heard some interviews or read some interviews as well with from band members within Mötley Crüe, like Nikki Sixx, saying they were kind of worried that this is going to be turned into some kind of comedy. Look, there are definitely some very funny moments in this movie, but it is not a comedy because, especially with Nikki Sixx, there are some very, very, very dark fucking moments in this. I mean, crazy, like, be prepared right from when this movie opens up. Okay. Spoiler alerts ahoy, by the way. I'm just going to say that right out here because I for those that haven't listened to me before, I think people that like keep you from spoiling shit, I consider you, honestly, you're terrorists because like you're holding our tongues hostage and fuck you. Like I'll talk about whatever I want to talk about and say what I want to say. So, you know, and don't worry. I mean, you have to, here's the thing that kills me about spoilers. Like, look, folks, you've got to see it happen anyway. People can tell you how it happened, but you still haven't seen how it happened. So really, in my opinion, there's no such thing as a spoiler even, but just to warn you on that. But anyway, from the beginning of this movie, like in the opening seconds, this is a very, there are things that are very extreme that I've never seen in a movie in theaters. I've never seen in a movie, say on HBO or, much of anywhere. I mean, some of this stuff, yeah, some I've kind of seen in theaters, but again, this is all based in, or the concept here is that this is somewhat, displaying reality, the reality of the lives of these, of these four guys and some of the people around them. But some of the stuff with Nikki Sixx is really, I mean, some of the child stuff is very traumatic. You want to be prepared for that. Okay. I mean, there's shit that will just like surprise the hell out of you when it happens. There, obviously when Nikki Sixx is on his complete downturn with heroin, you see that. That shouldn't be a spoiler alert. I mean, people know these stories. They've been around for a while and he's done whole albums about them, for fuck's sake. So, but right at the opening, there's a great scene, which I'll just say the squirt. Okay. I'll be kind about it. The squirt. I mean, you're going to get shocked right from the beginning, and that's good. I mean, because that's Mötley Crüe for you, right? I mean, that's how it's done. So Jeff Tremaine, I mean, I'll break this down. I think that his directing was great. I thought the writing was really well done. It's a film where the fourth wall gets broken a lot, where like band members or whoever's involved, because sometimes it's Doc McGee, ends up actually talking to, they talk to you, the audience, the people that are watching the movie. Rich Wilkes ended up doing the screenplay, which I thought the script overall was great. The changes that were made, I mean, there's times where you could feel it, like, they were crunched for time. This thing is under 2 hours. You can't put in everything that's in a book. In fact, there are kind of funny moments where they say, and there was this guy, but we can't talk about him because we just don't have time. So we're going to leave him out of it. But at least they kind of mention him. So they still get to be a little bit respectful, right? So I thought that was very, very clever of them to put that in. As far as the actors go, I think for the most part, the actors were fairly dead ringers, especially, and this one blew my mind, especially with Tommy Lee, because with Tommy Lee, you have, his real name is Colson Baker, right? And of course, everybody else knows him as Machine Gun Kelly. And MGK actually does some work with the new songs, particularly the song "The Dirt," the title song, on the soundtrack for this, which we'll review that later on. But man, MGK as Tommy Lee, like that was crazy. Even Tommy Lee, I've read and seen and heard it, interviews with him about this, and he was just like, "Holy fuck, how did that happen?" Like MGK was so on for this, and he was, as far as I know, MGK was really supportive of doing this. I mean, MGK, he's more of your hip hop, pop. Well, maybe pop would be a bit of an insult, but like you're more your hip hop. You wouldn't really put him in with kind of the hard rock and metal scene. But let's be clear here, he's done work with Lizzie Hale. He had that tremendous song with Lizzie Hale. I mean, he crosses boundaries, and he really did it here. I mean, and his acting, I thought, was on. I mean, granted, if you're Tommy Lee, just act nuts, right? And you let it go. And I say that, I don't say that as an insult at all. And you just, let it ride. But anyway, I was very impressed with MGK as Tommy Lee in this. Douglas Booth, who I think is like Australian or British or something like that. But it's amazing. I mean, I thought he did a solid Nikki Sixx. I didn't think he didn't look as tough. And he didn't, look, Nikki Sixx, I'm sure, had final say on whether or not Douglas Booth was legit and worth using, and worth playing Nikki Sixx. But I just didn't think he looked as tough, and he didn't look as kind of like dark. And I mean, Nikki Sixx has a bit of like an evil, badass look to him that I didn't think Douglas Booth really delivered on, but it worked. It was serviceable, and he was very believable. The other guy, who I hope I'm going to get his name right, Ewan Rowan, I guess he's a big deal in Game of Thrones. I fucking hate that show, so I don't watch it. But he played Mick Mars. He was fantastic as Mick Mars. And the way that they presented Mick Mars in this, so great to have Mick get so much credit, because he's probably, I mean, he's certainly a very quiet guy, and you find out, various medical conditions maybe that lent to that, who knows. He's the guy that you really don't get a lot of. I've watched so many, video releases from Mötley Crüe, so many videos. I've watched so much shit, and he's always kind of the quieter guy. And Ioan Rowan, just like delivers, and makes Mick Mars, and the movie The Dirt makes Mick Mars, it gives him very much a center stage and makes him like the rock, of the group, and just this very grounding force. It was so cool. Like the scene where he's kicking out one of the original guys that Nikki Sixx is thinking about having on as a guitarist, with Tommy Lee on drums and all this, before their Mötley Crüe or anything like that. Like Mick Mars's scene with that, where he just tells the guy to get the fuck out, you're not going to make it. Like, it was dynamite. So and also his reaction to like Ozzy. We got to talk about that Ozzy scene. I'll get into that in a minute. Daniel Weber as Vince Neil. This is the one where, like, I never really felt that was Vince. I'm a big fan of Vince Neil, and I don't know, like, Vince, I know Vince Neil was kind of a little more of a wiry guy, but I'm used to Vince. He really always looked so tough. In fact, I remember from a Mötley Crüe Uncensored, one of their original home video releases from way back. Like, there's the classic line, I think it's during interviews from Theater of Pain. I have a comment there as well, but with Theater of Pain, where Vince Neil says, it's like, yeah, we may wear lipstick, but we can still kick your ass. And like, you believed it when Vince Neil said that. And like, you could just see Vince Neil getting in fights, the whole GNR thing, all this different stuff, man. I don't know. I just didn't feel like that Daniel Weber totally delivered on that, but that's my opinion. Again, everybody was serviceable. None of the acting really took away from the movie. I guess I would have loved to have seen something that maybe has more of their aura to them, for lack of a better phrase. But anyway, so speaking of that, there's a point in here. There's a lot of reality, or Vince Neil seems to do a lot of reality checks in this movie. Okay. And of course there is the tragic moment and that a lot of, Mötley Crüe fans know about, where of course he gets into the accident with Hanoi Rocks, band member, Razzle, and Razzle dies. And they did a pretty amazing job with showing how like having that event happen. It's pretty amazing that they're really, all the tragedy that happened, which is why I knew this would be a good movie. Okay. Regardless of how many how many kind of scenes shifted with it. Again, we'll talk about a couple of those. But they really, they hit the very tragic but high notes, and no pun intended there. But anyway, there's a point where Vince Neil is talking to Doc McGee in the movie, and Vince says, this movie Theater of Pain, it sucks. And like Doc McGee had just gotten a tattoo with with the pre-changed album name on it, which was originally Entertainment or Death. And then, Nikki that night changed it to Theater of Pain. And it's like, oh yeah, there's a couple good songs on there. And what's really funny is that like, I let that album kind of grow on me, like City Boy Blues, those kinds of songs. But I never really did like Theater of Pain. I got it. You got Home Sweet Home. You have, Smoking in the Boys Room, which well, for those that also don't know me, I'm straight edge. So that song never really did anything for me anyway. I get the cool factor, but it's a cover anyway and whatever. So I never really liked Theater of Pain. And I don't remember if I just skipped this over in the book that Vince ever said that, but that was amazing to hear it like in the movie, because I kind of agree that Theater of Pain is not like a great album. It sure as fuck isn't Shout of the Devil, and it sure as fuck isn't Girls, Girls, Girls. Which Girls, Girls, Girls might be my favorite Mötley Crüe album. If it's not Girls, 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 it's probably Shout at the Devil. So, yeah, Theater of Pain, just a weird moment. Not that they were really going for a different sound necessarily, but just something about it didn't work. So anyway, it was interesting to hear that in the movie, and almost like this is almost a clever thing to do, because if this movie somehow inspired other people to go back and listen to their back catalog, if they ran into Theater of Pain, people would be like, well, what the fuck was that? And so if you kind of set expectation, that album might not be the best in the world. I mean, that doesn't hurt. I think that's a good thing. So the acting overall, David Costabile as Doc McGee, I thought he didn't look like kind of the little guy that Doc McGee is, but it worked. All of that worked. All of the moments, like I said, I think they hit most of the high notes. Again, you have where Nikki Sixx dies, quote unquote dies. You have where, the accident with Razzle. You have the breakup, between Vince Neil and the rest of the band. I was disappointed. Again, in the book itself, John Corabi contributed a lot more. And I think the Mötley Crüe 94 album is a fucking awesome album. Like in fact, I've heard other commentators say this, in years past, that if that album, Mötley Crüe 94, if that didn't have the name Mötley Crüe on it, it probably would have been a major success. It would have been a big album because they had a very, very raunchy, dare I say almost grungy, I hate that word, but grunge sound. It was a really, really hard rocking sound. Very different. John Corabi's vocals, very, very different. Of course, Vince Neil will go on to do a couple of his solo albums. He has more than that now. That like Exposed, which would have a very Mötley Crüe sound, which I'm so glad because I thought especially Exposed is an awesome album. Carved in Stone, bit of a different animal, but Exposed is a badass it's a great, honestly, let's call it. It's a great Mötley Crüe album, and I say that with respect. But Mötley Crüe 94, very different, but I liked reading about what Corabi thought about at the time. And it does, so you didn't get much of that in the movie though. Again, you got to compress for time. They had to keep it under 2 hours. I would have loved to have seen more interaction between Corabi and the rest of the crew. But it didn't happen. And, and then the movie basically ends off with everybody kind of getting back together for that classic moment, where they do Shout at the Devil at the Grammys, right? And that would end up becoming Shout at the Devil 97 on the release of Generation Swine, which is a badass fucking album. It took me a few listens when I was younger to like really get into it, but now that stands pretty tall on my list of favorite, really metal albums all around, including because of, Shout at the Devil 97 and, Let Us Pray and a lot of those songs. So anyway, the movie really hits a lot of that. There are, like I said, there are some differences from at least what was said in the book. As far as what the reality is, that's a very different, situation. It's not the same old situation. Whoo, there's a pun for you. Anyway, so one of the big differences that I could really remember, because it stuck out for me, and I'll explain why, was the reason that Doc McGee originally got fired by Mötley Crüe. In the movie, they play it up as because Doc McGee brings Nikki Sixx's mother to meet Nikki Sixx years later, and Nikki Sixx, well, you watch the movie, you understand that their relationship is a total clusterfuck. And because in the movie, they make it that's when Nikki Sixx says, Doc, you're fired, get out of here. And as far as I understand it, that's not, in fact, Doc McGee has talked about this as well, and I'm pretty sure it's in the book, that's not what happened. Apparently what happened is Mötley Crüe was during the Moscow Peace Festival tour, okay, which was this, huge festival, back, what was that, 1990, 91, something like that. Which you had a ton of bands, we could do a whole episode about that, where you had a ton of bands really getting past the Iron Curtain, a bunch of metal acts. And that was really a hell of a thing. They were concerned they felt like Doc McGee was giving Bon Jovi at the time, who was white hot. Of course, so was Mötley Crüe. But they felt that he was giving preferential treatment to Bon Jovi instead of them. And so they fired him. Again, you're getting a lot of different stories there. I don't know why they chose to go with a completely different story that, as far as I know, didn't even happen in the movie, but they did. I don't think it really takes away from the movie overall, but that's one of the major differences where that really did not reflect, or at least the stated reality, including what was, like I said, I think that was originally in the book, that was the case. As far as giving preferential treatment to Bon Jovi, Mötley Crüe's great, but Bon Jovi, dealing with, just watch The Dirt. If you're Doc McGee, I'm just going to be straight here. If you're Doc McGee, are you going to want to deal with Pretty Boys Bon Jovi? Who are probably, and based upon their sustained success, Bon Jovi is still really, they never weren't on top. They had a return, right, with, in 2001 with Crush, with their album Crush and It's My Life. but they never really left the top. Is when they come out with an album, it's huge. When they do a concert, they're selling out. I mean, it's no, there's no comparison, right? They're just one of those bands like Aerosmith or like Kiss or Metallica or something like that, where they've never left the top, even no matter what changes that they've gone through in sound or style or whatever. But if you're Doc McGee, I mean, aren't you going to go, you got this new hotness or relatively new hotness with Bon Jovi? Or, are you going to deal with that with guys who, don't do all like throwing televisions out of hotel rooms like Mötley Crüe? Or are you going to deal with Mötley Crüe? You're going to deal with Bon Jovi, right? I mean, so even if that's the reality, like, I don't blame him. Like, I kind of get it. But regardless, this movie, I think there's, I don't think critic reviews are kind of mixed. Okay. As far as just to give you the overall, overview on this movie. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the hell out of it. I don't know that it's going to make anybody a fan because they do keep it grounded in its time, and I appreciated the fact that like they're showing the marquee, the billboards and everything. And it's like Mötley Crüe with Dokken, or Mötley Crüe with Y&T, and like David Lee Roth is there and everything. And unless you know that scene, I don't think there's anything there to convince you to go and join that scene. I have been amazed. I still want to talk about that Ozzy scene. I've been amazed, though, that because Netflix, I feel like anything Netflix puts out there, Netflix has this cult around it. I've talked about this on my show, Sovereign Tech, where like, basically college kids and a whole bunch of others, and not just college. I mean, seemingly every demographic, anything comes out on Netflix, and suddenly for 5 minutes, the whole world is whatever the fuck is that new thing on Netflix. I've been kind of pleased. I've driven through some college towns recently since this movie was released. And I'm not seeing a bunch of people becoming Mötley Crüe fans. Honestly, good. Like, that's fine with me because I don't want Mötley Crüe. The reason that they were able to make a movie about this is because they have a legacy that's sustained. They have a legacy, they have a reputation that lends itself to this. I know that the reason that Netflix wanted to make the movie is because they thought it would do money. And it would, give them some prestige and things like this. And it would play well off of Bohemian Rhapsody, perhaps. As to where, like with Bohemian Rhapsody, I feel like I encountered a lot of people who suddenly claimed to be like the biggest Queen fans ever. I have not seen this really happen with Mötley Crüe. You can email me at bbs@sovereigntech.com if you have, because I get tired of these kind of posers, I mean, it's good if you want to be like suddenly say, oh yeah, wow, I just saw this movie, I am really into this band now. But if you're going to act like, oh shit, yeah, oh man, I've always been into Mötley Crüe, give me a fucking break. And so fortunately I haven't really seen any of that kind of reaction to this movie coming out. But anyway, critic reviews, well, you're not going to, I don't think it made any fans out of anybody, but if anybody was a fan, I think it might get them back into the music a bit, or it gives them something to enjoy for being a fan. It's a nice little send off even after, their farewell tour. So, and I expected that more or less. I didn't, unless they really change things, really change the story, I didn't see where this was going to appeal to a very broad audience, because, I mean, and there's a lot of it that's like, again, really, really shocking, or I think conventionally shocking. It's not shocking to me. I mean, please, we're talking about well, longtime listeners of The Man of Tomorrow, the shit I've done. Like, I mean, this, none of this stuff's going to shock me. All right. But anyway, for most people, I could see where it would be, pretty shocking for them to see it. One of the things that's shocking, I want to get this in, and it's probably it's my favorite scene of the movie, next to the opening. I did love the opening before the credits roll. I really did like that. Like I said, it's the squirt. You'll know what I'm talking about. The scene with Ozzy, where they are, now I thought that the book and also like the behind the music back in the day had said that this was like by a tour bus, but apparently this was at a pool at a hotel where this happened. They're on tour with Ozzy, and let's give credit to Ozzy where it's due. This guy gave a lot of young acts at the time their opportunity to get in front of a lot of people by letting them open for him. And we can all be thankful to Ozzy for that. Say what you want about Ozzy, we'll give him that, right? Okay. So Mötley Crüe is opening for Ozzy. It's definitely their breakout, bit of business, their breakout tour. And in the movie, Ozzy is, and the actor playing him is tremendous. Like, it really, really works. Ozzy's like, man, you gotta be fucking nuts to do this, and he's giving them the whole spiel. And he asks him, like he's talking to Tommy, and he's like, oh, I want to do some coke or whatever. And it's like, no, man, we don't have any, or blah, 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 whatever happens in the scene. And this is the classic moment that has been talked about on Behind the Music in the book. It's been talked about many times, where Ozzy gets on his hands and knees and he starts snorting ants off the sidewalk. Okay. Now, like I said, originally, I think that was by a tour bus. I could be wrong about that, but regardless, in the movie, it works. It does its thing. Not only that, he starts doing that, and the guys in Mötley Crüe and everybody like sitting around the pool is like, holy shit, what the fuck is going on? But he's trying to show them this is where this life is going to take you. If you don't die, you're going to go mad, right? And then, he does, like, Nicky tries to kind of upstage him, Ozzy then pisses and licks his own piss. Then Nicky goes for a bit of the upstage, does his pissing, and then Ozzy licks Nicky's piss up, right? Talk about lick it up. There's a little kiss for you. I don't think that's what they had in mind. But it's this just crazy, crazy fucking scene. And it really shows, I mean, honestly, like, what this scene really shows is we want an Ozzy movie. The only problem is I don't know if we'd ever be allowed to get a great Ozzy movie. I mean, because you think Mötley Crüe's nuts. Ozzy's fucking nuts, right? And talk about legacy. I want to see that movie, but I don't know if Sharon Osbourne is ever going to even let that thing happen. But fuck, that'd be an amazing, an amazing film. Even if you could just get at some of some of the legends, again, things that we don't know where exactly happened. Even if you just made it out of the legends, fuck, that's going to be an amazing thing. So, I mean, and I watched No More Tears, the documentaries and everything for Ozzy and all that. And those tell some pretty amazing stories, but like to see a movie, boy, that'd be something. I would really love to see that. I mean, hell, actually with Ozzy, it's been so long, you can't do a movie. You got to do like a limited run show, do one season, 13 episodes, something like that, to really tell, I think, even try to tell that entire story, just to try. But it really pointed at that. But Mötley Crüe, The Dirt, I liked it. If I'm going to give it a, 10 out of 10, as in 10 being like the best, 1 being what the fuck did I just watch? Is that a Hanson movie? 10, I wouldn't give it a 10. But I'd give it a solid 7. I think there was a lot to like there. And I think that there's actually, if you're a Mötley Crüe fan, there are a lot of interesting perspectives to take from it as well. But really, I think this is something only to either reintroduce you to the band, maybe introduce you if you're just getting into more classic metal and rock. If you're already like going down that road, I think it could be interesting for you. Or if you're a Mötley Crüe fan, it's something to enjoy, to kind of like put face to, or, put some motion to the event that you've heard these stories about for so many decades, right? That's what I think. So I'm going to give it a solid 7. It's not going to make converts out of anybody. If I thought it could do that, maybe I'd give it an 8. If it had like all these amazing moments in it nonstop, I probably, maybe then I could give it a 9 or a 10, but I'm going to give it a good solid 7. I liked it. I liked it a lot. It was a very enjoyable film. I think with what they did do, I think the length of it was right on. And I think, again, the directing was fine. The acting there's points of the acting that were great. There were points of the acting that were serviceable. They worked. And the story overall and the dialogue, everything kind of being put on. Yeah. I mean, it was Mötley Crüe, and I'm not gonna complain about getting more Mötley Crüe in my life. Let's put it that way. So anyway, all right, we're gonna come right back, and we'll do a quick review of the soundtrack for, again, a track by track review of the soundtrack for the movie The Dirt, and then maybe I'll have one other subject that I'll get into, and then we'll wrap this inaugural episode of the Hard and Fast podcast. You're listening to Brian Sovryn. I'll be right back with more. Woo! Hey, when you're going to your next rock show and need a hotel, don't forget to use booking.hardandfastpodcast.com. Booking.com gets you the best prices all around the world, no matter where your next rock show is, and is loaded with reviews so that you get the best rates and the best hotel rooms, because, you never know who or how many people might be going back to your hotel room later that night, baby. And if you use the URL booking.hardandfastpodcast.com, you'll get a $25 cash reward. Can you beat that? Again, use booking.hardandfastpodcast.com to get $25 and the hottest rooms at the hottest prices. Booking.hardandfastpodcast.com. And don't forget to put up the Do Not Disturb sign, baby. All right, let's get back to the show. Woo! Woo! Back with some more Hard and Fast podcast for you, baby, and we got an album review to get into here. I will say, so if you have experienced anything different with, like, you looking around you, wherever you happen to be, okay, and after The Dirt came out on Netflix, again, that came out March 22nd, if you've seen, like, suddenly, wow, people are wearing Mötley Crüe t-shirts and all this other stuff, let me know. Like, I want to know if I'm wrong, because an interesting thing that happened, actually, with the soundtrack is that it entered, or it reached number 10 on the Billboard 200. And that's actually I guess that's the first time in, well, probably 10 years that Mötley Crüe has had an album, in the Billboard 200, or well, at number 10, because Saints of Los Angeles, right? That came out in 2008. That dropped and charted at number 4, I think. So something to, well, I mean, it sounds like a lot of people were buying the music, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just in the wrong part of the world to see what the real reaction is. And maybe for, I don't know, a couple days, people thought that they were Mötley Crüe fans. And of course, then they dropped it and waited for whatever Netflix told them they should be into this week, because, I mean, that's usually how people operate, is they're just into whatever the mainstream media and, mainstream venues tell them they should be into. So anyway, look, folks, it's the facts, okay? Tell me I'm wrong. BBS@sovereigntech.com. Go ahead and argue with me. But anyway, so the soundtrack has a total of 18 tracks. Again, this is basically a greatest hits album. Is there anything wrong with that? No, because in the movie, you were going to play, if you're going to do it right, you're going to play some of their greatest songs. But there's some deeper cuts that are available, that are on this soundtrack, which I think are really great. So we're going to break this down track by track. Like I said, there are 4 new songs here that, in fact, really, there were a couple songs like All Bad Things and Sex, which were just singles that were released by Mötley Crüe over the past 10 years. One of them was part of the farewell tour. The other was something they just kind of released. I actually liked the song Sex. I thought that was really cool. I thought it would have behooved them to actually put them onto an album. I mean, and round this baby out to an even 20, out to 20 tracks. I think that would have been really cool because those songs aren't really available anywhere else other than more or less as like an iTunes single or something. And I don't like buying my music on iTunes. Of course, you can torrent shit, but I'm just going to say that you're not going to hear that from a lot of other, metal journalists, but I'll put it out there. So Dragonaut One's got you covered, baby. Woo! Anyway, so let's break this down. We'll start off right with track 1. Track 1 is arguably the single, the quote unquote hit off of this album, which is really just greatest hits. And that song is The Dirt, established 1981. And this is the song also that has Machine Gun Kelly in it. It's a good song. It opens up with kind of like a dark foreboding, like, holy shit, what's going to end up coming? The thing I don't exactly like about it is that, not that Mötley Crüe hasn't done this before, okay, but it feels very much like, it feels like a rap song in that it's them talking about themselves. Does it make sense to have a song like that when it's a movie about yourself? Sure. I guess it's okay to have like a celebratory song, but I mean, it's good. It's a pretty good rocker. Vince Neil sounds great. Everybody performing sounds good. I don't have any complaints about that. I just, like when bands kind of sing about themselves in that way, where like they're really singing about themselves. I mean, you could say Mötley Crüe, sing about themselves and Girls, Girls, Girls. Yeah, but like the way they sang it, it could apply to anyone who's, Friday night and they need whatever they need, right? So, but it was okay. It worked. I mean, John 5's in it. I mean, you've got so many people performing on this song. This is definitely meant to be, again, this is supposed to be like their little hit that comes out with this. It's a good song. It's not one where I'm thinking, I want to listen to some Mötley Crüe. Put on The Dirt, the song. I don't think I'm ever going to say that in my life. And that's a metric for a song. So, but it's fine. And the opening, like kind of dark foreboding part of it is cool. I kind of wish they would have kept with the darker sound for it, but they didn't. So anyway, it's a good song. Not exactly great. In fact, I know we're going to do this track for track, but why don't we go ahead and get into why don't we talk about the 4 original songs? Because the next ones, there are 3 at the end of it. And so we'll just go a little bit out of order. So here's track 16, which is Ride with the Devil. Another one where and then after that is Crash and Burn. Both of these songs, very serviceable. They kind of sound like a sick love song off of Red, White, and Crew. And they also keep playing up on this theme of the dirt. Like you hear the lyrics constantly over and over again, the dirt, the dirt. I don't know, again, they're on the movie soundtrack, so I guess it makes sense to constantly reference the title of the movie. It works in the songs. Ride with the Devil's pretty good. Crash and Burn. You don't want to use the word good. I mean, they're both fairly solid rockers, but it's nothing that really stands out. Now, the song that did get a lot of attention, more so than the actual song Dirt, was they did a cover of Madonna's, yes, a cover of Like a Virgin. I love this. I thought it totally worked. I can't believe that more bands haven't pulled from like Madonna's, just tons string of hits and turn them into metal songs. I'm not saying I want them to. Mötley Crüe, because they're contemporary with Madonna, I think it makes sense. There's nothing I hate more. Or maybe there's some things I hate more, but there's few things I hate more than when like a modern rock act that's trying to make it big, like a new act or a new music act, whatever. When they make it big off of doing a cover of like some kind of 80s song or something like that. And hell, even if it's like a semi-modern band, like you think Weezer and how they redid, the Toto song, Africa, fuck them. I mean, fuck them right in the fucking, what the hell are you doing, Slapnuts? Like, and it doesn't even sound different. That's even worse. They just like did a straight cover. Fuck you. But the video, when you watch the video, and because Weezer is never a serious band, like it's all treated like a joke. Well, that's a fucking great song. Toto's awesome. Yeah, I'm a metalhead, make no mistake, but Toto's fucking great. That's an insult. Anyway, Madonna, the cover of Like a Virgin, I don't think it was an insult at all. I think it was a very fun rendition of that song. I'm sure Madonna thought it was cool as hell. Yeah, I mean, I think that worked. I know a lot of people are like, what the fuck are they doing a cover of Like a Virgin? No, it's great, and it's hilarious. Of all people of Mötley Crüe to do a cover of Like a Virgin. I mean, I thought it was great. I really like that. I mean, in fact, I liken it to off of Love Gun when Kiss on their last track on that did Then She Kissed Me. I love that. It's so cheesy and ridiculous. It's great. I liken it very much to that. And maybe out of the new songs on here, it's definitely the best one. Out of the 4 new songs, I thought that takes top marks. So anyway, there's the 4 new songs. Not a whole lot to talk about with the 3 actual new songs. Maybe a lot more to talk about with Like a Virgin. I could see it as a press play, right? Like it's marketing where, okay, we'll do this. This is going to get people talking about it. It got people talking, that's for sure. But I like it. I like it a lot. So anyway, again, it's none of those 4 songs are ones where I'm like, yeah, man, I want to listen to some Mötley Crüe. Put that one on. That will not happen. But let's go way back up to track 2, which is after the actual title track, The Dirt. And this is one where if I said, yeah, I'd like to listen to some Mötley Crüe right now, I would put this one on. And the song is Red Hot. Red Hot is off of Shout at the Devil. This is just a very quick, fast-paced, very raw. Of course, Too Fast for Love and Shout at the Devil, they're Mötley's, 2 first albums, have a very raw, very raunchy sound that they never totally replicated, even if they tried. And like, if you listen to, I mentioned New Tattoo earlier, their 99 album, Nikki Sixx was billing that as, oh yeah, we went back to our kind of Shout at the Devil sound. Well, look, New Tattoo is good. I don't know if I'd say they went back to their Shout at the Devil sound because there's nothing on there that really sounds like Red Hot. And Red Hot, bit of a deep cut, not one that people think of a lot, but I really enjoy the song. I actually loved it because I used to go to a restaurant, and this is at the exact time where I became a Mötley Crüe fan again as a teenager. Me and my buddies, we would go to this restaurant called Zeb's, okay? And world famous restaurant. We would go to Zeb's, and they offered these 2, like spicy hot dogs as one of their dish, and they called them Red Hots. And so every time I'd look on the menu and I'd see it say Red Hots, I'd go, Red Hot, like I'd do the whole thing. And I'd order it, just because of the Mötley Crüe Association. I'm sure they had no fucking idea that was going on. But anyway, it was, that being the people at Zeb's, but I just thought it was hilarious. So Red Hot, I think it's a fun little song and a nice deep cut inclusion on here, as well as track 3, which is On With the Show. Now this one gets interesting because On With the Show has an opening where it talks about Frankie died. And I had no idea, and actually a lot of metal journalists that have been in the game a lot longer than I have also had no idea that was talking about Nikki Sixx, because originally his name was Frank. And that was so cool to like realize that and see that in the movie. This is one of those things where if you're a longtime Mötley Crüe fan and you didn't realize like that there are things to learn about this band, there are new perspectives to take that change the way you look at things. And On With Show is a great song. I mean, that's a really, I mean, Too Fast for Love is a track for track album. I also think that Shout at the Devil is a track for track album. Every track you can listen to, you listen to those albums stem to stern. So any song you put off of those isn't going to hurt you. And that's true. On With the Show is a great song, and Livewire, hits next. That's track 4. And of course, maybe you could call it their breakout hit, their first hit. Such an intense song. So cool, so yeah, great inclusion to have that. There's no way you weren't going to have that on this album. Track 5 is interesting, which is Merry-Go-Round. A slower song, but a lot of fun, which goes right into Take Me to the Top. And then it goes into Piece of Your Action. Again, this is track 5, 6, and 7. All tracks off of Too Fast for Love. You're going to notice that the bulk of the songs on here are from Too Fast for Love, Shout at the Devil, and Dr. Feelgood, as we break this down. Too Fast for Love is an album that has such a raw sound that I think with other metal musicians, it feels like it has a more modern sound because it's so raw that it still gets a lot of attention. And I've heard Nikki Sixx kind of say as much. I don't think either of those are Shout might be their best album, but Too Fast for Love, I get it. I don't think it's their best album, but like a lot of those songs, there's a lot of variety and sound there and everything. And so, I understand. But I think they have this like opinion that young people, if they are going to get into Mötley Crüe, they're going to like Too Fast for Love. That's going to be like the album that's going to hook them. I've never encountered that where that's the reality. I think that's sad if that's the reality. It's a great album. It's an awesome album talk about an album that gets like a 9 or a 10 out of 10. Too Fast for Love is one of those albums. But this idea that somehow that's going to get a younger audience, I don't buy it, and I've never seen it happen, but whatever. I think that's why a lot of those are on here. Also, granted, this is the time frame that a lot of the movie is covering. It's their wildest time, it's their growing up time, their breaking out time, and all this, so it makes sense. But then we get into Shout at the Devil, which has a similar, I think, idea in the band's head, as far as like, this is what's, these are the songs that stand the test of time. These are the songs that might get us new fans or something like that, would be Shout at the Devil. Shout at the Devil is an awesome album. In my opinion, an absolute 10 out of 10. But anyway, so you get track 8, which is Shout at the Devil. Of course, a total classic. I was kind of hoping they would do the whole opening with, Children of the Beast. You know what I mean? The whole thing there. But they didn't end up doing that. Oh, well, that was one thing I was hoping for, but they go right into Shout at the Devil and it works. Looks That Kill, major MTV hit for them. Major MTV hit for them, as well as Too Young to Fall in Love, which is tracks 9 and 10. Both massive hits from Shout at the Devil. And again, both got them a lot of MTV play. Worthwhile to put them on there. It's 2 of their best songs. I think it makes all the sense in the world. In the movie, when they're doing Looks That Kill and they're showing the filming of the music video, they reenacted that music video pretty damn well. I was impressed, even where the one gal is like terrified and her hands kind of shaking. I thought that was so cool. Would have loved to seen them walking around with the torches, but whatever, you get what you get. So fantastic songs. Then we go into track 11 with Home Sweet Home, arguably their Mötley Crüe's biggest song of all time. Of course, it's going to end up being on what is effectively a greatest hits album. Slower stuff, but it's there. Then go into track 12, which is Girls, Girls, Girls. Another one where you just kind of have to have it there. You can't show Mötley Crüe without showing strip clubs, and you can't think strip clubs even to this day without thinking girls, girls, girls. So, another no-brainer inclusion. I am shocked Wild Side is not on here, because that was, in fact, some people like Wild Side more than they like the actual song Girls, 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 and they're from the same, album of that title. I was shocked that that's not there, but I guess you gotta, you can't put everything. Right. Smoking in the Boys Room not being on this album, great. I'm so happy for that, because that song doesn't really do anything for me anyway. But I'll tell you, Girls, 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 you got to listen. If you have not listened to Mötley Crüe, somehow you are new to Mötley Crüe, or somehow this movie did convince you to get into Mötley Crüe, you got to listen to that entire album. You got to hear All in the Name of, even their cover of Jailhouse Rock. I mean, Mötley Crüe they are not new to covering classic songs. I mean, even on New Tattoo, right? They did White Punks on Dope. I mean, they're master, I Want to Be Your Anarchy in the UK, right? From Sex Pistols. I mean, they do awesome jobs of cover songs. So, again, at the end of this, having Like a Virgin, that's just Mötley Crüe being Mötley Crüe. I don't know what the fuck these people are doing complaining about it. You're ridiculous. They've always done this shit. I mean, they covered Elvis, for fuck's sake, come on. So anyway, then Girls, Girls, Girls goes into Same Old Situation, an absolute hit off of Dr. Feelgood, but a hit that maybe doesn't get played enough. And, it's one that maybe hasn't been spoiled by radio play, be it back in 89 or to this day. So that was a nice inclusion from Dr. Feelgood, in my opinion. Kickstart My Heart, badass song. You have to play it because it was inspired by one of the most tragic events of the Mötley Crüe story, that being, Nikki Sixx hitting rock bottom and then more or less dying and then coming back to life, right? Which is what that song's all about. So that has to be there. Then it goes Dr. Feelgood. Of course, you're going to spend so much time talking about how big Dr. Feelgood was. You're going to put that song on there. Makes sense. And then that's track 15. And then again, the next 3 tracks are just the new tracks that were cut for this, including the aforementioned Like a Virgin cover. So it's a good album. It's not the best greatest hits album out there. It's the only way you're going to get like 4 of these songs that are on there. Mötley Crüe has greatest hits albums that do not have new songs on them, or do not have original songs on them or previously unreleased songs on them. So this could be, say, as far as like spending money on an album, if people even do that, this is one to spend money on. I think that's not unfair. Is it my favorite greatest hits album by them? That's a tough thing to call. I mean, because so few bands have where they can even do multiple greatest hits. I would not, this is not their first greatest hits album that I would punch up. I would punch up like greatest hits updated, like that, probably that, or I would even do like Decade of Decadence is actually a lot of fun, even though that would get superseded by Supersonic and Demonic Relics. But like having all those classic hits and then having Teaser, Primal Scream, Angela, Rock and Roll Junkie, those are 4 great new tracks. I mean, those are awesome. Some of the Mötley Crüe's best songs. So I wouldn't put it as like their best greatest hits album, but this is a nice introduction. Definitely introduces you to a lot more of their raw sound. Don't have so much of their polished sound, and it completely disregards Generation Swine, which I think is unfortunate. It disregards Saints of Los Angeles, which, that album is what it is. It disregards New Tattoo, which is a shame because I think that's a great album. Largely disregards Girls, Girls, Girls. So, I mean, there's a lot missing here, but it's something, and it's doing money for them. It's on the Billboard 200. I am more than happy for Mötley Crüe on that. So anyway, if I were to, I guess, it's tough. How do you rank greatest hits albums? Like out of 10? I don't know. I'd give it a 7, just like the movie, just because, again, you have 4 songs on there that, other than Like a Virgin, are pretty forgettable. And I hate saying that, but that's the reality of it. So anyway, okay. I was going to get into one last subject, but this has already run over an hour. I generally don't want this show to run over an hour, especially if I don't have any interviews lined up for the Hard and Fast podcast. But baby, you just got it hard and fast. So I'm going to wrap this one up. But the mystery of the Dragonaut, well, you can email me if you think you know what all that's about, and it's not hard to figure out. But that's going to be a fun thing. I will talk about that more in an upcoming episode of the Hard and Fast podcast. Again, you've got so much action coming up soon. There's going to be some re-releases of classic metal content from Zomia 1 and Sovereign Tech history, but then also we're going to get into all new content with interviews with some of the hottest acts out there right now, baby, and some of the hottest acts that are still going. There's going to be reviews of concerts. You're going to have more album reviews. So much action. I love it. I am so excited for the show. As I said at the top, I'll say it at the end. Fucking excited for this. Metal on, baby. And remember, metal is great for fucking. It really is. Try it tonight. Woo!